Yeah, bring it to you. Oh, Mark's got a shirt. He's flexing. He's dancing. He's flexing. He's dancing.
Space Cats. Cosmic Cats
on the Flashback. And welcome to another edition of Flashback to the Track. As always, I'm James. That's Mark. And we're presented by Blue Emu for maximum strength, pain relief for your tired muscles and joints. Try Blue Emu. They have a plethora of products, but you know what? They all look like they scream maximum relief. Mark, what's your favorite product again?
My favorite product is definitely the Blue Emu recovery bath. But it's close. It's close to the continuous spray, which is right there. I love the continuous spray because you just spray it on. Like I'm a big spray sunscreen guy. Mm-hmm. It's way easier. Same kind of deal. So I'm all about the continuous spray.
And always protect yourself from the sun. That's another thing,
Always. Skin cancer is no joke. Folks.
Yeah, melanoma is no joke. It doesn't matter if it looks overcast. The UV rays will find you. So.
And you can get sunburned in the winter. Just because it's cold out doesn't mean you can't get sunburned. I always forget that every year. So.
Yeah. Well, Mark, we have a really cool podcast lined up, man. We got a guest. It's guest week.
It is guest week, and this guest is amazing. I reached out to this guest on Twitter, and thanks for getting back to me. A lot of people don't. I know I shoot my shot. He got back to me. So we have James. Who do we have? Why don't you tell us? You can announce this amazing guest.
Oh, man. We have Ray Dunlap. That's right. The infamous truck guru, pit reporter, analysis. Name it. He's done it. He's been in this industry for 21 years as a broadcaster. It's crazy to see him throughout the years, and now we get to talk to him about some of probably his best moments, some cool highlights, and really understand his career. Maybe some people can get some perspective for them as they try down their motorsports endeavors.
Yeah, Ray's gonna be awesome. I was really excited to do this interview, man. Like Speed Channel, it's just synonymous with Ray, and it was part of my childhood. So really excited to let's jump right into our chat with Ray Dunlap.
Ray's garage, by the way, is significantly less fancy, but is conveniently located right next door, and that's good because Ray's not well today. It required overnight therapy and extensive rehabilitation to restore his mental stability after the news that Ohio State lost. However, he assures me he is prepared to deliver a report on the technical side of stock car racing. Go get it, buddy.
I sure can help you with the technology, that's for sure.
Really? From all those years of working in broadcasting? No.
You know, what's funny is I learned to edit and do all my own pieces back in the day, but the equipment was all analog and we used real tapes, and today in the digital world, boy, I'm un poquito.
Did you ever have to cut film though, Ray? Physically?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I sure did.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go. Never learned that. So.
Yeah. Well, remember, I graduated college in 1987, so you probably weren't born then.
No, you just missed the mark on my birthday there.
Just a few years early.
You went and you got you had an arts degree, I believe, when you graduated college. What was your experience like at Bowling Green, man? Like, was that like a different kind of school? Was there a lot of like technology at the time for you to like kind of delve your hands into?
Well, we had a really good radio and television and film program at Bowling Green State University in Ohio, and the thing that made it neat is we had an actual facility for a public broadcasting station, so you worked with real equipment on real TV stuff all of the time, so that made it great. But really, I think the thing that was so interesting about going to school there was the faculty. We had a whole bunch of people that had started in radio and TV that had 40 and 50 years of experience there. And at the time, you either wanted to go to Bowling Green, Ohio University, or you had to go out west and, to the West Coast. And I loved Bowling Green. It was about 16,000 students there, and it was just perfect.
So something that I noticed, I don't know if this is exactly while you're just graduating college or right after college, but you produced a local access television show. It was called At the Speedway.
Yes, sir.
For a lot of people today, that's like having a YouTube channel, having a place to physically broadcast your content. Tell us about that show. How were you able to produce it and what eventually became of it?
Well, it really was a very interesting concept at the time. I lived in Columbus, Ohio, and we had a public access channel that, back in the day, cable companies made so much money, and the cities said, you got to give people a place to go out and tell their story. So in order to do a show there, you had to volunteer on other people's shows, and you accumulated credits, and you could use those credits to either rent equipment or use the studio or whatever. So it was kind of like a timeshare kind of a deal. So I worked on some really interesting shows back in the day. People come on there with all kinds of crazy ideas. But my plan was simply to rent the equipment so that I could go out to local racetracks. We had Mid-Ohio, sports car course was very close. So I did a lot of work up there with the Truman family. I got very fortunate to become friends with Bobby Rahal back when I was trying to put this thing together, and he did a lot to help me. And it really was pretty much a one-man band. I mean, when you looked at the credits at the end, it said Ray Dunlap editor, Ray Dunlap camera, Ray Dunlap, but the concept was get experience and be out there and talking to the race car drivers. We had a short track called Columbus Motor Speedway, and I filmed all the features there. And just so happened that because I had taken radio and TV in college, I was pretty good with a camera, so I could run the camera. And then I tried to learn how to be in front of the camera.
So what was it like to learn to be in front of the camera for you? Were you a natural kind of guy? Would you be able to talk to yourself in the mirror and then just feel comfortable in front of the camera? Or did that take a process to feel comfortable?
Yeah, I pretty much all my life I was that atypical person who, in school I did the morning announcements, I hosted the pep rallies, I DJ'd the dance, I called the basketball games, inside, did most of and it's kind of funny how you fall into those kind of things, but somehow I had some sort of a natural ability. Right from the time I was very young, I was always loud and obnoxious, and and I guess it paid off somehow. But no, you have to, especially when I got out of college, I didn't know for sure where and how you find an opportunity, and of course that's the thing that faces most people is how do you get in front of the decision makers. And luckily, my public access channel in Columbus, that show did a lot for me because when I did my interview with Bobby Rahal, it was about an hour and a half long, and I compressed that down into a pretty good show. And when I got done, Bobby said to me, he says, "What was this, 60 minutes?" He goes, "You know more about me than I do." And, because I put a lot of time and effort into getting ready for that particular interview. And when it was over, Bobby got on the phone, made a few phone calls and said to some people, "You got to check this guy out. He's got it together." So I was very fortunate in that way.
Looking back on ARCA and ESPN, like throughout the 90s, you have memorable calls from the booth and being an analyst, calling for a series that you previously worked as the media relations director for. So how did you get that role as the media relations director, like in ARCA, and then eventually go on to be, in the booth calling the races?
So while I was in Columbus, Ohio, doing my At the Speedway show, ARCA ran throughout the Midwest a lot, and they ran in Dayton, Ohio, Toledo, Ohio. There was a little track called Shady Bowl that was in the middle of those two. And they would go do a weekend stint where you'd have a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday race on short tracks. And, and I called the people at ARCA and I said, "Hey, I'm a racing guy and I've got a camera and I can come and I'll shoot these events and I can edit together a package and send it off to ESPN and TNN and we can get you some highlights on the motorsports shows." And they're like, "Well, we don't ever get any coverage, so what's it cost?" And I said, "Oh, a couple $100 to get me there and buy some hot dogs and pay for the videotape." And so I did that 4 or 5 races in a row while I was still trying to produce At the Speedway, and I would show the ARCA highlights on my show. And it really sort of steamrolled into the fact that I was there. The bosses said, "Why don't you come to our meeting before we open up the gate so you'll know what the details of what's going on?" So I was hanging out with those guys. And then we had a really controversial race at Killcare Speedway in Dayton, Ohio, or Xenia, Ohio. And I got that video to ESPN, and it made it on Sports Center that night. And they played it over and over and over because there was a big fight and a wreck, and it was really crazy. And the guys at ARCA said, man, that's just great. What's it take to get you to come work with us? And I said, well, a couple $100 and some hot dogs, I guess.
That's crazy. I mean, so you started as a PR relations person. You worked there for a while. And then through the relations that you had, I'm assuming just by sending things off to ESPN and working with an ARCA, how did that relationship kind of form to you working for ESPN on the analyst side?
Yeah, it was again, you got to be there and you got to put in your time, and that was sort of the thing. When I started as media relations director for ARCA, part of my job was to film the short tracks because we didn't have live television events there. But when we would go to the super speedway, and let's say ESPN was covering at Michigan, well, Bob Jenkins and Ned Jarrett and Benny Parsons would be in the booth. And my job was to go up there and have little index cards with information and be there to answer any questions they had about our procedures. And, we'd go at a commercial break and they'd all turn around and go, hey, what's that? Why are we doing that? I didn't know that rule. And I'd explain it to them. And I gave them little note cards with info about each driver, drivers that maybe they didn't know or have time to get to meet. And so I did two full years of being in the booth with those guys. And again, then I had to go to the meetings. And so I met the producers, and we're standing there and I'm telling them all, look, one of these days, one of those guys is going to be out of that seat, and I'd like to be in there. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. You and my cousin and 17 other guys. And I said, yeah, I get it. But we had a race at Talladega, and Benny Parsons got food poisoning. He had been out doing a Buffet Benny set, and he got sick, and he wasn't able to work on Saturday to do the ARCA race. And they were in the meeting and they said, who's going to do it? And I said, I know a guy.
Joining us is Ray Dunlap, who is the media relations director for the ARCA series, replacing Benny Parsons today, and glad to have you aboard.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Ned. I wish Benny was here, but it's a beautiful day to go racing. You were talking about the inexperience in this field. Well, you've got to run your first super speedway race somewhere, and that's one of the nice things about this ARCA Bondo Marhide series. Guys like Davey Allison and Grant Adcox have used this series. Davey in the early 80s and Grant in the late 80s. Davey won 4 times here before he went to Winston Cup, and Grant won 5. But Tim Steele is the only driver in the field today who's won here. So today, we very well may see a brand new Talladega winner.
And that was where I got my first chance to actually be on ESPN on the air, to do a broadcast. And of course, I knew the content, I knew the people, and I guess I did an okay job that day.
I think probably one of my favorite calls was 97 Atlanta, I believe the Reese's 400. Obviously, everyone remembers Benny's little misslip with shot out of a canyon. but you right at the end, the assertion, Harris Devane.
Yeah.
That comes from that knowledge, like you speak of, to understand the sport. Because I don't believe Harris was even a full-time driver at that point. You knew everyone in the garage area. Right. Talk about that beat. What's it like to go through the garage area, get these stories, meet these people, and is it also something where you have to not only meet these people at the track but away from the track as well?
When I first started on ESPN, obviously I was the ARCA guy, but I got an opportunity then to go do Thursday Night Thunders with Dave Despain and meet all the guys in the sprint car series. And my favorite thing about my entire career, obviously it's always great when you're in the booth and you want to be a play-by-play guy and you aspire to do that. And I was fortunate to be able to cover, just about every division that way. But when you're in the grassroots part of it and you're in that garage every week, and especially like ARCA where we had a Friday, Saturday, Sunday race, you spend a lot of time with those people. And if you're good at memory or if you're good at note taking and you ask good questions, you get the little tidbits and information that's interesting to the fan that there's no way they could know that at home. And, that's the funnest part to me is not only to have that ability to bring insight, but like you're talking about with Harris Devane's win, these are, a first time win for any driver is probably my favorite thing that I've ever experienced in all of racing. And that goes whether it was Dale Jr. at California when he got his first Busch Series win at the time, or down to, a guy at a local track on Saturday night, that moment and that feeling, and to share it with them. And most of the time it's their friends, I mean, you spend so much time, especially back in the day, we spent more time with the drivers than a lot of the guys can today, simply because of the logistics of the sport.
And did being like your career as a PR guy, did that really help with that transition to knowing everyone and being able to, maybe they felt more confident giving you information?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think that job and spending that time with us, because see, when you're the PR guy, your job is to try to help promote them. And sometimes the drivers feel like when you're the media, it's your job to not promote them. And you have to bridge that gap and be able to create that trust factor so that when you do have to ask the hard question, when there's that moment there's controversy, you've got to be able to have that relationship. But yeah, the PR job certainly did. And not only did it help in the relationships with the drivers, but it helps you with the relationships of the team, for them to understand that you're there for the good of the whole product. But every once in a while you get put in a situation where you got to do your job. There's times where that can be really tough, but it's not just building relationships with the drivers. It's the public relations peoples for the team. It's the owners. It's really hard to get access to the owners in NASCAR today. But back in the day, if we're at Darlington, we all got together and everybody drove out and we went to lunch together, so I think it's a different dynamic today. But yes, the answer is being in the public relations not only helped me understand their viewpoint and their side, but also the fact that we're there to promote a product.
So during your time at ESPN, you also appeared on NASCAR Today, hosting that pre-race show, which was pretty big at the time because that was one of the first official pre-race shows. You provided ARCA race analysis and Busch Grand National analysis. You also were able to cover the Craftsman Truck Series, Busch Grand National, and Winston Cup Series events from the pits. And something I actually remember was your appearance on Saturday Night Thunder events. Out of all of those roles, did you really have a favorite, or was it just all amazing to just be within the sport?
Wow, another great question. Again, there's great moments when you're in the booth calling play-by-play, and every once in a while you do something that's either really funny that people remember, or that your knowledge helped break that story down and make it understandable. Those are great moments, but I think when I look back on it all, the traveling in the lower divisions, doing those Thursday night and Saturday night Thunders, I covered ASA back in the day when that was a really good series and they had a good television package. Traveling every weekend for ARCA, that grassroots thing, there's something pure and natural about that is that's really great. But then there's a moment like, when Dale Earnhardt won at Talladega and, passed all those guys in the last minute, and I'm standing on the pit box with Richard Childress thinking I'm going to get an interview, and he picks me up and hugs me so hard that I about couldn't breathe, and we're jumping up and down and we fell off the pit box. I mean, it's one of those moments you just never forget. So there's some of those personal moments that make it great, but probably the most important thing that I think I ever was a part of was at the time when ESPN lost the TV contract in 2001, we weren't allowed to be in the garage to do interviews because Fox and NBC said you can't be there. So we had to be out at the helicopter pad or at the airport or somewhere where those drivers were leaving to try to get those sound bites and information. One of my colleagues, Mike Massaro, he fell right into that same job behind me after I moved on from that position, and he did probably even a better job than I did. But it was incredibly difficult. You were under an enormous amount of pressure to try to get 6 or 7 interviews in 8 minutes, because these guys are trying to get on their airplane or helicopter and get the heck out of there. And you had to have knowledge of what happened in the race. You had to be prepared to work fast, and you had to, we put together some really great information and packages of stuff that the network TV guys didn't get. And that was quite an accomplishment. And I'm really proud of the crew that worked on those events, because it was very challenging.
In that time too, like you mentioned these tough circumstances, like how much of it is having to think on your feet as a pit reporter and someone down there? Because, we see the funny videos of Regan Smith running down the pit lane and things like that, but how difficult that job really is, and how much you have to adjust to things happening. You don't know when you're going to get a guy or where you're going to have to go to. So what's that really like?
Well, and every racetrack gives you different challenges for that. When you're at Talladega and there's a big crash and you got to get to the care center and get your interviews, and then pit stops are coming in 10 laps and you got to get back there and get in position and know where to be or who you're covering. I mean, sometimes that really is an all-out sprint, even if you have a golf cart. But I think, there's moments like, I don't know if you remember when Kyle Busch wrecked Ron Hornaday intentionally in the truck series. I think we were at Texas, and he went into his trailer and he's like, I'm not talking to anybody. And I got there, and we had 3 reporters on that show, and he eventually said he would talk to me, which, made me feel very good because I had built that relationship. But he was still young, and he was really, really angry. And I felt like I diffused him enough to get a pretty decent answer. But I mean, you get moments like Mike Stefanik, where when we were at Daytona, and you get a guy that's just so aggravated, you're not going to get much. It might be funny, but it was, at the end of the day, you're sitting there and you're thinking, boy, I don't know what else I could get out of this, so I'm just going to have to walk away. And every once in a while, you need to be able to use that amount of judgment. There were times where Tony Stewart was just about impossible. You put Mark Martin and Bill Elliott on that list, and those 3 guys, without a doubt, gave me the biggest challenge throughout the course of my career when I was working in the Cup Garage. But they also gave me some really great highlight moments where we had interesting conversations too, but knowing when to walk away, I guess, is part of the answer.
That's fair. I mean, you always have to know the emotional state as you walk up. You can't, like, as you said, you understand the situation that the driver was also put into, because you have to look at that as well.
Well, and we get access. I mean, we have access to these guys that's really unprecedented in major league sports. You're not going to go in an NFL locker room and grab somebody who fumbled on the 1 yard line and they lost the game and stick a mic in his face, 30 seconds after the game's over. They just don't allow it. You're not going to get that access. So NASCAR is very unique. All of auto racing really is unique in that sense. And I think people have done a pretty good job of adapting to it over the years. But yes, there are some moments where I walked away and said, doggone, I could have had a lot better question than that. And that happens in victory lane sometimes too, because there's this rush of emotion and energy in victory lane, and you're seeing people on the crew that are friends of yours. Your brain's saying, man, I'm happy for that guy, or I want to shake his hand. And every once in a while you say, oh, shoot, I got to have a good question here, and not just say, tell me about your day.
Yeah, something that I literally think of, I just rewatched this event, was the 2009 Dover race from the Truck Series where Brian Scott won. And Brian, like you said, first time winner, super excited, but he's all over the place. He's just thanking everybody who's everybody who's around him. And you were able to guide him with questions, obviously, that you knew from your research. Like you said, when you're in that moment, do those things pop in your head, or do you have those prepared well in advance?
I wasn't probably nearly as good at sitting down and thinking of a list of questions ahead of time as some interviewers are. And it's really interesting when you look across the board of people who worked in the past. Obviously, Jerry Punch was a huge mentor to me. Dr. Jerry Punch, one of the best ever on pit road or in broadcasting in general. He'd be way up there. He was much more, I think he probably sat in his hotel room and said, here's my 5 best questions for each guy. I never really did that. I let it be a little more free form. Dave Burns, who's still involved at NBC, is to me one of the best question askers out there. I think he does a really good job of mentally preparing for that situation in victory lane. But for me, most of the time, it was a little more spur of the moment, or something that occurred to me that had happened while we were at the racetrack that I might have a little bit of insight to help make that question more relevant.
And we talked about, ESPN losing their NASCAR deal at the beginning of 2001. And when the Truck Series rights ended, they lasted to the end of the 2002 season with ESPN. But then many of those pieces from the broadcast team transitioned over to Speed Channel, including yourself. And what was that transition in your career like, going from ESPN to a Fox-owned property?
It was frightening in the sense that we got a call from the guy who was in charge of Fox at the time. His name was Rick Miner, and he was in charge of talent. And he called all of us on the ESPN crew and said, "You're out. We really appreciate what you've done in the past." Excuse me, please. And we think you guys were great, but we're going in a whole new direction. And we just wanted to let you all know, don't waste your time. Don't keep calling. You don't need to send videotapes. We're aware of what you do, but we want to get a completely fresh new team involved for our deal. And I said, I'm not ready to give up on that, because I love the Truck Series and I love the people there, and I've spent a good deal of time putting myself in position to be at least the pit road authority. And so I just bugged him to death. And luckily he was in Charlotte and I was in Charlotte at the time. So I conveniently bumped into him at lunch a few times and just walked by and said, "Hey, I think you're making a mistake. And if we get a chance, let's talk about this a little bit." And it all turned out, it all worked out okay. But at the very beginning, I think they were pretty bound and determined to say, we just need a whole new, fresh look of people, especially in the lower division. And so I think my persistence paid off a little bit there, but it was scary. Now, to answer your question of what was it like once we got started, it was really great, because they gave us a lot of really cool tools. And we had they let us build a young and exciting racing production crew around that Truck Series, and a bunch of people who were really dedicated. And a lot of them came from the Thursday Night Thunder kind of a deal, because those people from Indianapolis, everybody from Lingner Group, which was a production company there, they were all dyed in the heart, real serious race fans, and a lot of those people got involved, and it helped us build a kind of a brand there with that truck team. And I'm sure you guys remember, I hope you got a chance to see some of our Halloween specials that we did.
Oh yeah, Talladega.
Yes.
I remember Gilligan's Island. Yeah.
Nobody else was willing to go there,
Yeah.
They just weren't. And I was like, come on, guys, let's go full costume. And we're doing a race on Halloween weekend. You got to give it your all. And Keith D'Alessandro was our producer at the time. And he's like, "Man, if we're going to do Batman, we got to rent a Batmobile. Where do we find one?" And we went out and got a Batmobile, and had the real car there. And I mean, they put a lot of effort into that. And chances are we wouldn't have been able to pull that off at ESPN.
I mean, it also kind of speaks volumes to like what you're trying to create as far as a brand. You know, you weren't just broadcasting races. You know, you speak to the what eventually Speed would create with the Truck Series, and one of those pieces within, I guess, the brand was obviously some commercialism. So within the title sponsorship, you were a pitchman as well.
Yep.
The Craftsman Tool Tech segments were very impressive because those were some live reads that you could mess up on, but the Camping World ones were very informative as well. What was it like to balance being the analyst tech guy, but also knowing you had to be a pitchman as well, especially during these segments?
I think part of that comes back to just a little bit of who I am. And, you know, I did theater. You know, most of the other guys on our crew, boy, you never know how to say this the right way, because I think a lot of them wouldn't have been interested in doing that, because it does put you sort of on a fine line when you're pitching a product. But my goal with all of those, whether it was Craftsman or Camping World and all the products that they had, was to have fun, hopefully make it a little bit funny if we can. But I think my strong point back then, if I can spend some time patting myself here, was I also was involved in the physical layout and production and how we put those segments together, working with the producer and the cameraman and saying, what do you think about if we come under the car and then come up to the bumper, because I'm going to be there to show you that the Eldora truck is very different than a Speedway truck, and we really need a visual here. And they were all great with working with me with those kind of things. But yeah, I like those kind of things. And I spent a lot of time sitting around at night thinking about how do we make it visually interesting, and hopefully how do we make it funny. And especially with the Camping World stuff, they gave me a long piece of rope to run with some of those things. And we had a couple of them that were really, really good, and I'm pretty proud of.
All right, we'll get back to the podcast in just a moment. But first, have you heard the word, Bird? The word is that Blue Emu's got a new look. That's right. It's sleek, hip, modern, and it screams maximum strength. And that's what you'll get when you use Blue Emu for relief on your tired muscles and joints. So, for maximum strength, look for the new look of Blue Emu at major retailers nationwide. Now let's get back to the podcast.
I remember Craftsman Tool Tech, man. I remember wanting a plasma cutter when I was 16 because I saw Ray Dunlap talk about
all right.
Like, that'd be cool, you know?
Yeah.
But that group you worked with on Speed, man, like Phil Parsons and Michael Waltrip and Wendy Venturini and Rick Allen and all those people, like, you guys seemed to have such a great chemistry. So you either had great chemistry or are really good at faking it. So what was it like to work with that group?
Yeah, there was no faking it. I can promise you that. They're very close friends of mine. I keep in touch with all of those people today, see how things are going in their lives. You know, we all end up going a little bit different direction. And, you know, like when Rick Allen got the lead job at NBC, I figured, oh boy, I'll never hear from him again because he's a superstar. Right now, we're very close and we talk a lot. We have great friendships. And you know, when you travel the lower division, it allows you to go out to dinner in Des Moines, Iowa as a group and have some beers and enjoy yourself and not have to worry about sequestering in your motorhome and never, you know, being seen in public. It's really quite a luxury. And we as a group did that all the time. Our production crew was involved, the producer, the director. You know, we would all go out and go bowling together and do things. And I believe it really helped bond our friendship and our ability to work together. Obviously, there's some times where we have disagreements. You know, I mean, I'm a fairly forceful person about my opinion, and some people really like that, and some people don't like it at all. And there were times in some of our meetings and stuff where, you know, there's moments where you just straight up disagree. And sometimes we had some heated discussions about that. But when it was all over, we would sit down and say, how do we make this product better next week? And I think there's, you know, today there's so many shows on the air with practice and qualifying and all that. There was before COVID, that a lot of these guys are pushed in so many directions. A lot of the announcers are pushed in so many directions and on the air so often that they don't really ever have time to hang out and be friends.
No, I mean that's very fair. It's about the camaraderie, because as a group, you guys are always together. How many days a week would you say is a straight production weekend, from the way when Ray has to get there to when Ray has to leave the racetrack for a race weekend?
Well, I mean, it was either 3 or 4 days at the track, depending on your assignments. If we went to do a standalone truck race, like say in St. Louis, we would go in there Friday morning, or fly Thursday night, go in Friday morning, do the race on Saturday. And if you were lucky, if it was a daytime race, you might be able to get out that night, but typically you stayed over and you left Sunday morning. Standalone truck race was very different than a Cup companion weekend, because chances are, depending on what network you were with, like if it was a Fox weekend, there was chances I was going to be doing all the truck stuff, and then I would do like an Xfinity Series practice or a qualifying show, and then we'd do a pre-race, maybe be part of the pre-race for the Cup or whatever, or be doing news and sound gathering. So on a Cup weekend, chances are you got there Thursday morning and left Monday morning, and then either Monday morning or Tuesday morning first thing, you have your conference call to start throwing ideas to the editors for the upcoming weekend. So it was different depending on what your assignments were.
What were some of your favorite assignments to really work on from week to week, or more consistent assignments?
Well, a lot of times I tried really hard to incorporate graphics into my opening. If we were going to do a truck race, I wanted to have some sort of a graphic piece of information that I could show and then expound on. And then a lot of times, like if we were doing Race Hub in the studio in Charlotte, I really enjoyed that, because I'd get time. I'd spend a day or two working with the graphics department to say, okay, I want to reach over here and I want to slide this one and move it, and I want to take this guy and X him off, and that takes a little bit of work for the computer guys to put all that together to make it look interesting. And I think that probably kept my interest the most, to try to incorporate either video and graphics into an open and make that transition smoothly to look like we knew what we were doing. But sometimes it didn't go so well. But you give it a good hard try. But my favorite job, probably, and when you say an assignment, was play-by-play in ARCA. I again, back to the fact that I had 30 some years of experience and knowing these people. I grew up with Venturini's back when Bill Sr. was racing the race car, and and they had an all-girl pit crew. I mean, this is back in 87, 88, I mean, so it was a long time ago. And, and I know the history of most of the teams as they come through ARCA, try to progress and move up to trucks, and move up through the rankings. So, play-by-play for ARCA was great. I think that was a spot that I don't know, I guess, again, it's so hard to say whether you did a good job or not, but a lot of people complimented me on the fact that if they watched that broadcast, they felt like they came away knowing something they wouldn't have if I wasn't there. So that makes you feel really good.
I mean, for me, I always felt like it. I always felt like, especially when you were on Race Hub talking about like truck series content too, I was like, Ray is that truck guy. Like I don't, if I heard it from Ray, it's probably end all be all for the truck series. And the same with the ARCA coverage, especially like when you were on Fox too. I was like, yeah, it's Ray Dunlap. He's been like doing ARCA at least since the 90s from what I can remember. So to me, you're credible. So I feel like you were able to easily sell that for sure.
Well, and you hope to have some sort of a label, you want to be the guy for something, and look, it's quite simple. And most everybody told me right from the beginning, you're probably never going to be a play-by-play guy in the Cup series. You don't have all the pieces. And I'm like, okay, I'm all right with that. I'm fine. You know, if I don't get there, I'm not going to walk away and say my career was a failure, because if you're the truck guy and you have the information, you know, I did that series for 17 years, I think, you know, that's quite a compliment. And I've always felt like I covered, you know, every series that I worked in, I tried to have the same amount of information. But when you have that knowledge and history of going every week for 17 years, or you've been in ARCA for, you know, 25 years, hopefully it shines through a little bit that you have some knowledge. But I appreciate the compliment.
And I'm pretty sure like the entire like NASCAR nation could, at least from our time period, especially watching race. So we always knew when Ray was coming on to talk trucks, it was gonna be a serious truck conversation. So that was always probably one of my favorite segments during that weekly show. So, but one thing that Mark pointed out to me too was how you really have some of the most famous and infamous calls from some of the craziest moments in the truck series, from Travis Quaffle being stunned to be the 2003 champion and interviewing him at the Homestead finale, to having to break the news to Jimmy Spencer in 2005 that he did not win the Daytona 250 while he sat in victory lane. What's it like to be in those scenarios, having to give those interviews under some pretty dire circumstances, and also kind of looking back, noting how they have such a big place in NASCAR history?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that much, but another great question. It's, you know, some of those moments just are organic and they happen. And hopefully if you have enough experience, you know when to talk and when not to talk. Or hopefully you have a good question in it, or you can fabricate one in a quick moment. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. There are some really wild moments that happened. You know, I mean, Hornaday and Sprague, you know, I'm sure we could dig up quite a few things that happened there over the years. We did the race at Gateway where there were like 8 green, white checkers, and it was the weekend before they changed the rule, which I'm 100% vehemently against the fact that they changed the green, white, checkered rule. I think most anybody that knows me knows my history on that. I think that they've got a very bad policy in place right now in NASCAR. But in the trucks, we had it every week, no matter what it was. You got to finish that thing green, white, checkered. And ARCA's been that way through history. Now, I don't know if that will change now with their affiliation with NASCAR or not, or maybe it has. But nevertheless, that's a policy. That race, there were a lot of wild moments. One of my favorite moments, and I don't know if you guys saw this one or remember, but we were at Gateway on a different year, and somebody ran into a power pole off of the Speedway, and the lights went out. And so we had like a 25-minute delay. So you got to run around and interview a bunch of guys. So I said to my producer, I said, I've got this funny little bit ready. I said, so if you know the power's coming on, come to me. And they did. And I was down by a pit box right on the pit wall. And there was a plug that was just laying on the ground that wasn't plugged in. And I says, hey, I think I found the problem. And I plugged this thing in, and my cameraman, he looked up to the sky, and all of a sudden the lights were coming on. And we laughed and laughed and laughed. And everybody was like, man, how do you come up with that? But it was just one of those moments where it's like, I saw this plug that was just laying there, and I'm like, this will be really funny. So there are some of those that stand out that you look back on and you say, wow, that was good.
So if you search Ray Dunlap on YouTube, that's the first clip that comes up.
Oh, really?
It says Ray Dunlap being funny. And then you click on it. But I want to ask about that. So as a broadcaster, rain fill, like, people do not appreciate it enough. Like, stuff that you jump through hoops to fill time during the rain. I remember a race at IRP where it rained for like 3 hours, and they interviewed every single guy on the grid to fill time. So what is that like?
Well, it's really quite a challenge. And you know, when you're finding the guys is half of the challenge, of guys or gals, you know, finding them, just getting to them and saying, can you come here, or can we get to you, or I've got an umbrella. That's half of it. And especially today in the Cup deal where the guys take off and they go to their motorhomes and you run into the PR person, you say, can I get an interview? And they're like, no, they're playing tiddlywinks. So, it's a challenge just getting there sometimes. But I will say this, every once in a while, you get a really special moment in an interview during a rain fill where you get to know something about that driver that you could have never known during the content of an actual race because they reveal something to you. There was a couple of times, we revealed that a driver and his wife were pregnant and nobody else knew about it, and you'd get that in a rain fill. Or again, you try to do the comedy bit. I'm not afraid to skip down the road and spin my umbrella like Singing in the Rain, whatever. So you just try your hardest, but yes, it is a challenge. And it can be, like you said, when you get down to those last 3 or 4 people, there's a chance you don't have much information on them because they might be there for the first week. And then you got to say, well, tell the folks at home a little bit about you.
So one thing that you were a part of that's not technically pit road or at track related was being a part of the speed series, the 10. You give a lot of great insight and analysis while on camera. But were you involved in any of the production of that series?
No, they said, hey, look, we want to ask you 30 questions. Do you have a half hour? And we sat down at the green screen behind us and they just started throwing questions at you. And I like the fact that they didn't prepare us for any of those because especially like with a Jimmy Spencer or a Kenny Wallace, you got a real good answer instead of a prepared answer. But some of the time afterward, I kept thinking, boy, if I'd have known that question, I'd have thought a little bit more about what happened that day. After you do a couple thousand races, especially in this old scrambled brain, it's hard to remember some of the actual facts or statistics, but I like that. I like that interview process that they did, and I really like the production of the way the shows went together. But no, we didn't get any advance warning about what the questions were. It was like throw it at you and see what comes out.
The power of editing right there. Just produce that thing.
Yep.
I guess something else too to talk a little bit away from the track is something I've noticed on your Twitter is you have a very cute cat. I recently connected with Rick Mass on Twitter over cats. I did not know he was a cat person. So what's it like being a cat daddy? Do you like cats or what's that deal?
Well, it came upon me because I got married 25 years ago, and my wife is a crazy cat lady. I love cats, and we've had a really interesting group of different kinds of cats. Right now we have a boy and a girl, and their personalities couldn't really be more different, and they're brother and sister too. So it's very interesting. But some people are dog people, some people don't have any pets. Growing up as a child, we didn't have pets. I never had dogs, cats, or lizards, or turtles, or nothing. It just the way our lifestyle was at my home. But soon as I met Bobby, my wife, she's like, we'll never be without a cat, and I'm pretty okay with that.
Awesome. Yeah, we're both cat dads. We love cats. So I feel like there's just this taboo thing about guys owning cats, and we got to kill that stigma. Cats are awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Has your cat allowed you to teach you anything about your life? Do you analyze things differently through your cat's perspective by empathizing with them?
Well, I'm a very, very different person now that I'm retired from the racing business, in the sense of I have a much better appreciation of the important things and spending time with people that you love and family. Not that changed any really necessarily in the center of my brain, but you come to realize how many things you miss when you're gone from Valentine's Day to Thanksgiving, every single weekend chasing racing. And my girl cat sits on my lap every night when we watch the news and then watch Jeopardy. And we have a little bonding moment, and it's really, you know, if it doesn't happen, then something really weird went on that day that her and I didn't spend that time together. So it's a, you know, you get in a routine. Our girl cat has a very serious routine of when she's going to sleep and when she's going to bug us and all that. But you get a perspective of slowing down maybe a little bit and appreciating some things that maybe you took for granted in the past. And, you know, I think that's part from taking care of a cat and part from just not being on a go, what time am I getting to the airport kind of a schedule. It changes your life for sure, in a good way.
So what has been like the biggest thing you've been doing since your retirement, more or less? Like, what has been like occupying your time?
Well, in the summertime, my wife and I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we wanted to be closer to family, so we left Charlotte after I retired from my job. And Cincinnati is a really fun town, and we have a lot of activities. Obviously, this year with COVID-19, I didn't do much of anything. I'm a carpenter, sort of is my sideline thing. I build things, I make cabinetry and that kind of stuff. So I like being in a wood shop. But the last couple summers, while we're in Cincinnati, I worked at the Reds baseball park running a video camera. And then I also work at an outdoor music amphitheater as an usher. You know, live music is sort of my thing that's away from racing. It's something I've participated in a lot since I was 14 or 15. And I mean, actually to go and enjoy, not necessarily that I participate, but it's a big part of my life. And I tried to, you know, on 2 years ago, I probably saw 165 concerts. This in 2019, 2020, I've seen about 4. But you know, that's the way life is now. So it's different. So this year, not much. We spend the winters in Florida, and I'm currently remodeling our lanai, which is like a screen porch. And so that keeps me busy a couple of hours every day, but nothing that I'm committed to. I do some volunteering for, you know, picking up food at grocery stores for a homeless shelter, and trying to find little things to do for other people to make the world a little better place, because I've been so blessed with my career. But as far as fun factor, this year it wasn't very much.
It's good to see that you're giving back and still equating things. But one thing I heard from there, and I can't just let that glaze over. You said you're a carpenter. Mm-hmm. You and Rick Allen ever work on anything together? I know he's a big carpenter.
Yeah. I had a really, really nice wood shop when we lived in Charlotte, and Rick came up and took measurements from all of my projects. John Roberts, former broadcaster friend of mine, is a very good woodworker. And yeah, we worked on some stuff, not really worked on stuff together, but as far as designing or concepts or talking about how did you get this done. I'm probably more of a physical carpenter, like build a structure. You know, I did bookcases and entertainment centers and that kind of thing too. But Rick has really refined it to where, like, he's building spindles for his, for his new home stairway and that kind of thing. You know? So I'm probably not, I'm not exactly the same there, but all through my childhood, I put on roofs and we built physical garages and buildings and stuff. So I know the trade enough to actually really, build a building more or less from the ground up. So I'm pretty fortunate with that.
All Craftsman tools, right?
Yeah, I got a lot of good ones over the years for sure. And yes, I do have most of those still in my collection. Towards the end, my producer and director both decided that they needed to take some of those home. So I didn't quite get the full collection.
The one thing I forgot to ask about that, like when you were doing those segments, like the truck teams worked pretty well with you. Cause I remember you like prying on a truck that had just crashed and stuff. So they were all cool with that. You didn't just wait till they weren't looking and pry the bumper off. You know?
Well, I mean, you tried to go ask the right person if it's okay if I do this, but sometimes it was like they're coming to you and they're like, get ready, you got to do the Tool Tech Live because we didn't record one this week. And you know, we had a number of weeks in the truck series where we ran, you know, Wednesday night here, Friday night here, Thursday the next week, and the schedule was so discombobulated. A lot of times we didn't have time to get out and go to a shop to film those things. So they had to be live. And when it's time to do them, they're coming to you. Better hope you have the tools handy, and you make something up. But it was fun. You know, some of the Camping World bits that we did, we had a chance to really put some production level to, maybe a little more than the Craftsman stuff. But boy, there's, you know, like what most guys that I know, what guy doesn't love to get a box of new tools and figure out how to play with them? So it was a good deal.
Yeah, I'm waiting for my Craftsman tool case to come for this Christmas. Hopefully that is what Santa will bring me. I don't know. We'll see.
All right.
But finally, Ray, just to end off, like, what are just some of your favorite moments, I think, you know, from your time in motorsport that really stand out to you that you carry and you still think about today?
One great story, we were at Richmond doing they had a no bull Winston million thing. And I was supposed to interview Dale Jr. and Dale Sr. at the same time. And when I got them together, Sr. says, I've got to go first. Well, we had put together the format to roll the video that Jr. needed to go first. And I said, sorry, they're coming to me right now, but I got to do him first because they've got tape ready to roll. And I asked the question to Junior, and I leaned over with the microphone, and Senior reached up and he took his fingers and he pinched my fat roll right at my gut, just about as hard as you possibly could. And it dropped me to the ground, but I'm still holding the mic up in the air like this, you know, and I'm like talking to him. Well, the cameraman's in tight on Dale Jr., but I'm down on the ground and he's pinching me and my face is bright red. And they come back to me and I come over and I do Senior, and he answers the question and he goes, you know, next time you ought to consider talking to me first.
That's awesome.
You know, I mean, it's just some of those kind of things. You know, you guys brought up some good memories. You know, the Travis Quapple, you know, I mean, some of those you look, I forget about a few of them. But, you know, again, back to first time winners, there's really just nothing like it. And sharing some of those moments with people that are your close friend. Myatt Snyder won his first race in ARCA at Toledo Speedway, and his dad was there. Marty's a good friend of mine, an NBC broadcaster. And we're all jumping around, hugging, you know, off camera, and congratulations and high fives. And you know, some of the teams that just put in so incredible amount of effort that they just never were going to have a chance to win. And then when something lines up perfectly with the racing gods and it happens, you appreciate that so much. You know, there was some tragedy over the years. We've been really, really fortunate not to lose any drivers since I retired. But during my career, we had, you know, a number of moments where, you know, the solemnness of the reality of that hits you. It sounds weird to say that could ever be a favorite moment, but maybe most memorable a couple of times. When Senior died in 2001, and I was out at his shop to do a live remote, and just seeing the Uris and Teresa and some of them come out of that building and realizing, you know, what an incredible blow it was to everybody personally, but yet to how it's going to resonate over the years in the sport. That's a moment I'll probably never forget. You know, and then your first race, you know, your first broadcast, it just, you know, you step in any, you know, whether it's the first play-by-play or your first pit road, your first, you know, those moments of that incredible anxiousness and fear, and can I do this, and can I do a good job, you know, and then to let it kind of culminate in 21 years, it's when that's all said and done, there's a lot of great memories.
Thank you so much, Ray.
great questions. I really enjoyed it, and I'll come back on again if you ever need me to. It was fun going down memory lane, and I appreciate it.
No Absolutely. Problem. Thank you for the time, Ray. We really appreciate it. Shameless plug.
Yeah. All right,
very nice.
All right, guys.
See ya. Well, Ray had to run, but that's cool. We were already done, so it was really great to have Ray and for him to give us the time to talk to him. So thank you very much, Ray Dunlap. We'll definitely try to work having him back on the podcast at some point. There is a lot of gold out there on the internet. Like, for example, Ray Dunlap being funny. Come on, that's like such a good video.
Yeah, it's great, man. Like fantastic. Check that video out. Yeah, Ray's amazing. We had so much fun talking to Ray, and like just hearing those stories about being in the pit road. It's cool to hear from a broadcaster.
Yeah.
They have a different outlook on the way the sport works rather than from a driver would, and just kind of cool to hear him reiterate the fact that as a media member, it's like getting that relationship with drivers to the point where it's like, I'm not against you. I'm here to tell stories, and sometimes they're negative and sometimes they're positive, and just really cool to hear that and Rain Phil and all the different aspects of being a broadcaster. So just awesome. And it was fun to find out that they were actually all friends on speed and had a great relationship, and like fantastic, man. Like, God, it's just awesome.
Made me think back to our interview with Wally Dallenbach Jr. and he talked about all the amazing moments that he had with the crew outside of the track, and that's really kind of those relationships you build on the most. And to hear that, it's really cool for people to understand that the whole broadcast is a team. It's its own team, like a cup team is, or any kind of team out there. So you got to respect them as well and give them some credit. But man, Benny Parsons getting food poisoning. Come on, that buffet Benny. Darn you, buffet Benny. That segment.
It's just like, when Wally Pipp couldn't play in that game, and then Lou Gehrig, boom, and then he had a career afterwards. Same deal, So.
What's funny is, like, thinking back on it, I know exactly which race that was. I think that's the race where Ricky, the same weekend that Ricky Craven has that flip at Talladega. That's that weekend, so we got to watch that ARCA race at some point and check out Ray's first ever race he called. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. But thanks to our partners at Blue Emu for supporting everything that we do. Be sure you check out Blue Emu's wide range of products and the Maximum Strength Relief Cream in an all-new look at major retailers near you.
It's got maximum relief, man.
For James, I'm Mark. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and you can rate us on your favorite podcast app. That goes a long way. Thanks so much for listening, and again, huge thanks to Ray Dunlap.
Thanks, Ray. Have a good one, everyone.
Take care.